The parents didn't say, hey, I'm gonna see how much I can screw this kid up. The kids were rebelling, they were completely out of control, and it was just because they had lost so much that they didn't know how to express that other than anger and rebellion. In light of it being Adoption Awareness Month, we thought we'd do a video on adoption and the things that we've learned or things we wished we had known before we had adopted. You might think that we only have the 7 adopted children. We actually have 13 children that we've adopted over the years and 5 biological children.
So what we'd like to do is go through some of the questions that our viewers have posed to us over the last couple of years here, and just sort of answer some of those questions that you folks have had. Start with our first question here. Does adoption always cost 5 figures?
No.
No.
The short answer is no. So we chose to adopt through the foster care system. And when you adopt through the foster care system, there isn't a cost involved for the actual adoption.
And that's in British Columbia. Now, other states, provinces, territories may be different. Depending on where you live, I would check with your Child Protective Services, because typically our foster care system runs under a different system here, but I know most of the world is Child Protection Services. So talk to them and they can better give you an idea what any costs may be involved.
So to have an adoption, you have to have a home study done, and sometimes that will cost money. When we were adopting through the foster care system, that was something that the foster care system did for us, so we didn't have to pay for that, and the adoption itself didn't cost anything. If you are adopting outside of your country, it's going to probably cost a lot more, but there are different grants and things that are available. It really depends on what you're looking for in a child that you're hoping to adopt.
Next question that I have here, what if the birth parents change their mind? What happens then?
So when you're adopting from the foster care system like we did, the government already has the rights of the parents removed before the child is placed for adoption. So then that's not a risk for you.
So yeah, the government has full custody of the children at that time when they're in foster care. So the court has already been settled. The family court, everything's already been settled here in British Columbia, and custody resides strictly with the province of British Columbia.
So some people, when they are adopting, say they're adopting an infant, when the child's been placed with them, there is a risk that the birth parents could change their mind until the adoption is finalized. Once the adoption is finalized, they aren't able to change their mind, and they're not able to come back and say, now I want to raise the child, once the adoption is finalized. But there is a period between the date the child is placed and the date the adoption is finalized where there is a risk that the birth parents could change their mind.
That's correct. The risk is small, but it does still exist. So another question for us here. Is it an open adoption? Are adoptions considered open? And if so, what is the difference between an open and closed adoption, I guess, would be more the point here.
So of our 13 children that we've adopted, we've had different amounts of openness involved depending on the child. And we've taken our advice from the social workers who have had a relationship with the birth parents, and they have suggested what they felt was best starting out for an openness agreement. I'd like to remind everybody that it is much easier to start small and build up and open up than it is to have a full open adoption where you have the birth parents coming to visit and then say, no, I don't want to do this anymore. It is much easier to start small
and expand from there rather than having to scale back the openness.
So
that's been very big for us here.
So some of our openness has been letters back and forth. Others we've had visitations. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and it's your level of comfort as well. So what are you comfortable with? And make sure that you don't agree to anything that would take you out of your comfort zone. Once again, you can start small and say, you know what, this is working out. We have very respectful birth family, whether it be birth parents or grandparents. They're respectful of the process, they're respectful of us, and then you can expand it from there. But once you've gone full on with it, it's really hard to pull things back.
And we've had some very positive interactions with birth family and openness, and we've had some nightmares. And over time, we've learned how to accept what we're willing to accept, because we have had some of those nightmare situations.
Remember, you're in control. Say no if you need to say no.
Another question that we get asked quite often is, do the kids' birth parents or birth family watch our videos?
And?
They do.
Yes.
Even some of our adult children, their birth families watch our videos, and we've had really positive experiences, and I hope that they find it positive that they're able to watch the children growing up and see their day-to-day life as well. So we're hoping it's positive for us and the kids, and it's also positive for them.
Yeah, that's really important to us, that some of the birth family is able to track the children and see them as they grow. It may be difficult for them to watch at times, but it's important to us because it provides, that connection still that they have.
And we've been able to meet online and talk online to different members of the children's birth family, just because they've found our videos and been watching us and reached out to us. So we've been able to build some connections for the children with different members of their family this way.
Let's get another question here. Something that's very near and dear to my heart when it comes to the biological family. There's a misconception out there a lot of times that people think that maybe the biological parents aren't fit to parent. That's not necessarily the case. Every situation is unique. How would you like to answer that, whether people are fit or not?
Some of the birth parents might not have had the skills or the abilities when the child was born to be able to parent them. That doesn't take away any of the love that they have had for the children or still do have for the children. Whatever the reason is that the child went into care, it could be that the birth parents chose that for their children. It could be that they were apprehended. That part's really irrelevant, I think, because no matter what, the birth parents love the children and they want the best for the children. Yeah,
and I'd like to add to that too, that when we went into this, the process of adoption and stuff like that, I would say that we went in with a very non-judgmental approach, that everybody is a very worthy human being no matter what. And regardless of their situation at the time, however the children ended up in the foster care system, we don't judge. We love everybody equally.
And that brings to another part. We quite often get asked, so what's their story? What did the birth parents do to them? Or people are really angry when they see the kids suffering with their different conditions that they have, and they are mad, saying, if only the birth parent had done better when they were pregnant with the child, then the child wouldn't have to suffer so much. It's not always a case of that. There's genetic conditions that the birth parents had no control over, and it's not always a choice that they made. And if they did make a choice, if there was drugs or alcohol involved, because some of our children do have diagnosis where drugs and alcohol were involved, the parents didn't say, hey, I'm gonna see how much I can screw this kid up. Nobody has ever done that. It was they had addiction issues, or they may have had addiction issues that resulted in the child getting the diagnosis they did. But,
or a simple lack of knowledge of what they were doing.
And I really don't think that anybody's out there. I know for a fact that none of the birth parents from our children set out to intentionally harm our children.
No, I think they've always had the best interests of the child in mind, and
still do.
And still do. I don't know if it's more of a question or a comment here, but I'll read it out. In choosing to adopt, you are choosing to be both your child's protector and your child's advocate. You will be responsible for educating the uncouth teacher and the nosy neighbor, because you will encounter people in your circle that will not be showing as much respect as they should show. Is that politically correct if I say that?
It's not common for you to be politically correct.
True.
So it's also the doctors or the medical professionals, because quite often we'll be at an appointment and they'll be like, oh, they're the foster child, and you'll say, no, they're our adopted child, and oh, well, it's the same thing. They're not really your children. Well, yes, they are, and you're going to have to educate people that these are your children and they deserve the same rights as any other individual. They're not second-rate citizens just because they were placed for adoption.
Good point. So when it comes to advocacy, education is the number one, but being done in a very respectful manner. Sometimes you might have to put people in their place, but you do it respectfully. You don't do it to be mean or cut people down. That's the key.
Your child also needs to know that you have their back.
That's right. So another comment that someone put down, and we can expand on that. When adoption occurs, a loss occurs.
A lot of times when you are the one who's adopting, you can't wait for the child to come and join your family. Everything's going to be magical. You're going to have this new child. But you have to consider that the child, for an adoption to occur, there's loss. The child has lost their birth family.
Their place of familiarity. So they could be moving to another country, a totally different situation. So they're going to lose a lot of what they were hanging on to in their childhood, a lot of times, if they're an older child adoption.
And the birth parents and their extended family and friends, they're losing as well, because the birth parents are losing their child. They're still around, but they're losing all those dreams and hopes they had of watching that child grow up. And the grandparents and the aunts and uncles and the friends who all thought they were going to watch this child grow up, they've all lost that because they don't have the same control when the child's placed for adoption of seeing that child grow up.
So always keep that in mind when it comes to adoption, that it may be great joy for some people, but it is a huge loss for a number of others.
And it could be really hard on the child that's been placed with you. They could be really grieving the loss of everything that they had before they were placed for adoption.
And some of the children feel like they're caught in the middle of all of this as well. So consequently, they tend to act out. So you got to be prepared for everything.
One of our adoptions, the kids were grieving tremendously, and it was a really, really difficult time for us. The kids were rebelling. They were completely out of control, and it was just because they had lost so much that they didn't know how to express that other than anger and rebellion.
Yeah, so one of the things I think maybe we should clear up right now with our audience here is, how old were these kids when we adopted them?
So we've adopted children of all different ages. The youngest that we adopted was 1 year old.
Mm-hmm.
The oldest that we adopted was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And we've always chosen, when we've adopted, to adopt the harder to place children.
So what are harder to place children? What would you consider harder to place?
So the foster care system says harder to place children are sibling groups,
Yeah.
children, older children,
Okay.
teens especially. So the 12-year-old, they count that as a teen. So those are harder ages. And children with special needs.
So does that fit any of our adoptions?
So that would actually be all of our adoptions. Our first adoption was a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old. And they both had special needs. Sibling group.
Sibling group, older, and special needs.
Our second adoption was a 9 and 10-year-old.
Yep.
Brother and sister, older children, special needs.
And by the way, Gotcha Day is today. 18 years ago today we adopted. That was our second adoption.
Yes. Our third adoption, they were 5 and 8 years old, sibling group, special needs.
Yep.
And then our fourth adoption was our 4 of the 7 children that you see in our videos most of the time.
Yes.
And so a sibling group of 4 at that time, and then 3 more of the siblings joined us later. So a sibling group of 7 with special needs.
So the first of that sibling group is 7. Why didn't we adopt all 7? Because the 3 youngest weren't born yet. So we adopted the first 4, and then when the other 3 became available, our thing here is we need to keep siblings together. That has been super important to us, that we don't want to see siblings split up, which does happen unfortunately in the system sometimes.
And sometimes it's for the better for the siblings, but you really need to look at the siblings. For our children, I feel it was the best for them. If you could see them on a day-to-day basis, you can see our videos, but at home, the bond that they have is so incredible. And when I think that there was a chance that they weren't going to grow up together, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because they are so close. And to think they could have lost out on that is just heartbreaking.
It is. It's unbelievable, but it could have happened quite easily. All right, shall we wrap up with one more question here?
Yeah.
Okay, pre-adoption education / counseling can make the transition easier. Connecting with other families helps normalize the experiences. How does that all work?
So education is so important. You really want to know what you're getting into, especially if you're adopting children with special needs. And you might think, I already have experience on autism, I know it all, but when you add in the adoption, everything changes.
So I used to do conferences talking about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I used to travel around and be a guest speaker and stuff like that. And I've always said, if you've met a child with fetal alcohol, born prenatally exposed to alcohol, you've met one child, because they're all different.
And that goes pretty much for any special needs.
It does for everything, for all special needs. When you've met one person with autism, you've only met one person with autism.
So educating yourself as much as possible is very helpful. And when the child's placed with you, knowing where you can go for support is huge, because there's going to be days that you're at your breaking point. There's going to be days that you're at your breaking point with any child, but sometimes when you've adopted, you don't get the same emotional support, should I say, than if it was your birth child, because people say, but you signed up for this.
Yes. So what about connecting with other adoptive families? Is that helpful?
It is huge. We have been in groups with other adoptive families, and we've done different pre-COVID activities with other adoptive families so that the children have a sense that this is normal. There's other families that are just like my family. So there's other families that have adopted children with special needs. In our case, we've met lots of families that are larger, and the kids have become close friends with other families that are large families through adoption. It just helps so that you have a friend or a peer or an advocate, somebody that you can turn to that's going to help you through those rough times.
Can I throw in a bit of a caveat to this?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a couple of different ways of going about doing this, and we've actually experienced both ways. There's the organized route, which you'll tend to find that maybe some social workers or other representatives of government will want to put together these types of events. And those are great for making initial connections with families. We've been to many what we call adoption parties, and wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It's not just government agencies, there's other adoption organizations. But we've always felt that during these we're kind of under the microscope. And I would say that the better ones are the ones that develop more organically, where you get to meet with families that are not necessarily under the microscope of everybody else sort of kind of looking and observing what's going on. That's where you get to really connect with people, get to find out their real struggles, because everything is kept in confidence amongst friends as opposed to agencies. So I'm going to throw that one out there just as a thought to get your thought processes going. With the level of control that they have these days, I think it's good for stuff to develop organically.
But you might need to go to one of these organized activities just to meet some of these people so that you can build your organic relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, a number of different things that we've been to, they've been beautiful, wonderful. We've met a lot of very, very nice people we never would have met otherwise, and we've had friendships grow organically out of that.
So we want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
If you have any questions, leave us a comment and we will get back to you. We would love to hear any of your comments or thoughts on adoption.
Yeah, if you have any questions specifically, put those into our different social media. All right, take care, guys. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you. Bye.